Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me in this video. This is one I wanted to make for quite a while. I want to talk about the history of the QX60, the previous generation QX60, and how it compares to the new generation of the QX60. So maybe you're interested in buying a new or pre-owned QX60, you have some questions, you want to maybe see what the differences are, which one might be a better fit for you. So hopefully we can answer all these questions. We'll kind of do a little bit of a deep dive into the product, talk about the old QX60, how it evolved, the changes over the years, and this brand new 2022 QX60. These were actually sold out for a while, but now we finally have enough in inventory where I can actually use one to make a video. So I'm excited about this. So let's start now. Okay, so the first generation of the QX60 actually started off as a JX35 in 2013. It looks pretty similar to the QX60, so between 2013 when the JX35 first came out and all the way to 2020 when this generation of the QX60 was discontinued, you really haven't seen a whole lot of changes. They made some small updates to the exterior, they made some updates to the engine and stuff like that, but for the most part it hasn't changed a whole lot from 2013 all the way to 2020. So Infiniti was really ready for a redesign of the QX60 because it's a very competitive segment in this mid-size luxury crossovers, and they have a lot of good products out there. Like recently we had the Kia Telluride and the Hyundai Palisade that came out, very well received by the automotive press. And then when you have a Hyundai or Kia that's kind of encroaching into your luxury market share, we're definitely ready for an upgrade. And Infiniti, they definitely hit a home run, I think, with the newest generation of the QX60. It's beautiful on the inside and outside. They addressed a lot of shortcomings with the previous QX60, and I think it's one of the best products out there, and it can give anyone competing in this segment a run for their money for sure. It's a fantastic product, beautiful. This is a product where Infiniti really couldn't afford to have a mulligan. This is a bread and butter. Mid-size, luxury SUV. This is what pays the bills for Infiniti. So they knew that they needed to nail it. They needed to make it as perfect as possible when they launched it, and I think they definitely did that. So going back to the original QX60, it started off as a JX35 in 2013. Then Infiniti confused everybody and they revamped all their model names and they changed the name to the QX60. So really between 2013 and 2014, going from the JX35 to the QX60, it was really only the name that changed, nothing else really. So then, they continued along. Then in 2016, they gave it its first major revision, and they restyled the exterior and the interior. You can see it's not a, it's not a huge redesign. It's more of like I would call a facelift. Definitely looks a lot better, made it more modernized. And then in 2017, they did another upgrade. They upgraded the 3.5 liter V6 to direct injection. So horsepower increased from about 265 horsepower to 295 horsepower. And the gas mileage stayed right around the same. So that was a pretty big upgrade for the QX60, getting that upgrade to direct injection. And then really not till 2022 did we see any big changes to the QX60 when it was redesigned. So they had this old generation all the way up to 2020. This is actually a 2020 model right here, the last generation of the old QX60. They skipped the model year, so there's no 21 QX60. And then with a completely new redesigned QX60, they went right to the 2022 model year. Completely different body. Inside, outside is completely different than the old QX60. The one thing that is similar is the engines. I guess don't mess with what's not broken. And let's talk a little bit more about this awesome engine. Even though the plastic engine covers may look a little bit different, underneath those plastic engine covers is pretty much a completely similar 3.5 liter V6, also known as a VQ35 engine. This is a legendary motor used in lots of popular Infiniti and Nissan products. We first saw this come into the Nissan product line in the early 2000s. We saw it in the Pathfinder. We also saw this engine in the Infiniti QX4. We saw it in the G35, FX35, the M35. They've used this engine in lots of amazing products. We saw this engine in the Maxima, the Murano, the Pathfinder. The VQ35 engine is really, for a long time, was the backbone of the Infiniti and Nissan product line. It's completely naturally aspirated, no forced inductions, no complicated turbos or supercharging, just old-fashioned cubic inches and other cool technologies that Infiniti uses. They use friction-reducing technologies to make the engine as efficient as possible. They coat the pistons with very fancy compounds and stuff like that to make them nice and slippery, and they make them to very extreme tolerances, so you get a lot of power out of a engine that's not that big. We also saw this engine in the 350Z, and then a different version of it in the 370Z. They upgraded this engine to direct injection in 2017, so both in the the older QX60 and the new QX60, you'll see horsepower right around the same, right about 295 horsepower. And I've seen lots of these engines in various Infiniti products. I've been with Infiniti since 2004. It's January of 2023. I've been with Infiniti for a long time. I've seen lots of vehicles come in trade. I've seen lots of vehicles in service. And I can tell you, I've seen tons of Infinitis with 200 and even 300,000 miles of variations of this VQ35 engine, and they're just absolutely rock solid. If you want an engine that's well built and long lasting, the VQ35 is considered to be one of the best V6s in America. But the one thing that Infiniti did improve upon that people weren't crazy about was the transmission. If we go all the way over to this QX60 over here, the original QX60/GX35, the only transmission that was available is a CVT transmission, which stands for continuously variable transmission. I've heard other people call it like a rubber band transmission, which is probably not a favorable description of it. The idea about CVTs is that they're supposed to be very efficient by offering an almost infinite amount of gear ratios. I won't get too much into the nuts and bolts of what's a difference between a CVT and a regular transmission, but basically a CVT transmission can react to that current driving situation and offer a specific gear ratio for that specific driving situation. So, like I said, it's an unlimited amount of gear ratios for a CVT. But the driving characteristics are different. Like with a CVT transmission, you don't feel it change gears. It just kind of hovers right around a certain RPM and you kind of gain speed. Some people are accustomed to or like the feeling of gears changing. And I think maybe that could have resulted in maybe some lost market share to some other products that didn't have CVTs. We've had some customers say that they weren't crazy about the CVT. So happily, Infiniti with the redesigned QX60, they kept the VQ35 engine, but they dropped the CVT, and we have this new 9-speed transmission. And I haven't heard any complaints about that. It's smooth. It's great for performance driving, great for all sorts of driving, and very well received by the automotive press. And no complaints about the new 9-speed versus the CVT. I don't think anyone's missing the CVT at all on the QX60. Okay, sitting in the driver's seat of the previous generation QX60, this 2020, we can see that we have just a regular analog gauge cluster with a small center screen in the middle for displaying some vehicle info. Like it can talk about like some of our safety features and driver's assistant features. Information can pop up there. Pretty cool, but obviously nothing special. Not too different than what you'd maybe get, in a Nissan Altima these days. So when you're talking about a luxury SUV, maybe a little bit more desired for a a gauge cluster. All right, for an infotainment system, we just have a single screen right here. Pretty familiar navigation software we've seen throughout the Infiniti product line. Nothing too revolutionary. We've seen this for a while. We also have a parking camera. This one does have an optional 360 around view monitor, but obviously you can see it's just a single screen here. It's fairly small. The transmission is just a regular old-fashioned shifter. Also has a manual shift mode as well. Even though it's a CVT transmission, actually can simulate, it can act like a regular automatic transmission. It's kind of silly, but sometimes people like the feel of a regular automatic transmission when shifting gears. Then, heated seats buttons are just typical analog dial switches right there. Yeah, I mean, nice interior, nothing to complain about. Obviously, if you're looking for a pre-owned QX60, this is fantastic. But if we're talking about a new you know, $50,000 luxury crossover, obviously this is probably not going to cut the mustard for a lot of people. For a $30,000 pre-owned one, that's one story, but when we're talking about brand new ones, $50,000, with lots of great products out there to compete with this, that obviously by 2020, Infiniti was ready for an upgrade, which they certainly did. Okay, now sitting in the interior of this brand new, this is actually a 2023 QX60, but it's going to be the same as a 2022 QX60, no changes there. Obviously, the interior design is light years ahead of what we were dealing before. You can see that we have a fancier shifter versus a regular traditional old school style shifter in the previous generation QX60. We have a selector switch instead of a dial to operate the drive mode selector. Instead of having rotating dials here, we have buttons on the center console / dashboard to operate the heated seats. This one actually also has cooled seats as well. And then for the gauge cluster, no more analog gauges. We do have analog gauges to the left and right, but we have this big LCD screen which you can configure, put different information up there, which you're looking for. So definitely a big upgrade versus what we were dealing before in the old QX60. Likewise, the infotainment screen is a lot larger. It's more of a modern design for what we see with you know, similar products. It's not that kind of old, you know, rectangular, squarish screen. It's bigger, crisper, a different display for the navigation system, a lot bigger display for the camera, a lot crisper, higher resolution display as well. Obviously a big change, and of course we can see that the steering wheel is a different design as well. This one also has steering wheel paddle shifters, which was not available at all in any of the previous QX60s, so you can take control of those 9 forward gears. Okay, next let's talk about headroom interior space. I'd have to pull up the exact figures to compare them, but definitely just from my feeling of being in this one versus the older QX60, the brand new QX60 redesigned 2022 and newer, definitely feels like it has more interior space, more headroom. Obviously, people buying these vehicles have active lifestyles, growing families, so interior space and cargo space is a very important thing. So the previous generation QX60 as well as this one, the second row seats, they slide back and forth. They recline. We also have the controls back here for the rear climate control. Then we have USB and USB-C. Pretty similar to what we had with the previous generation QX60. But one thing that is different is that we have a single panoramic roof panel. So the previous generation, you could either get a single moonroof, which that one has, or you could have the optional panoramic roof panels, which was actually 2 panels. So you had a regular sunroof in the front that opens, and then you'd have a glass roof panel with a power sunshade in the back for the second and third row seat customers, which didn't open. You just had a sunshade that could power open and close. This is a little bit different. It's just a single roof panel, but it opens, and it also has a power sunshade. So that's another slight difference between the brand new QX60 and the previous generation QX60. Integrated sunshades. I know for kids in car seats, that hot beating sun, it's nice to have sunshades. And obviously we can find a lot of luxury vehicles and you know, minivans and crossovers that have kids in them that have these integrated sunshades to help produce, you know, sunlight in those hot days. That is available in the brand new 2020 QX60, 2022 and newer. The previous generation of the QX60, I have never seen an integrated sunshade. You just said we'd have to get the aftermarket ones if you wanted to add it. It was just when there wasn't something available, never designed or integrated into this vehicle. So if you're looking for integrated sunshades on your QX60, you'll have to go 2022 or newer. Okay, looking at cargo space in the rear, it actually looks pretty similar in both products. There's maybe possibly a little bit more with the 2022 or newer QX60. You have the ability to fold down the second and third row seats fairly flat, and they also give you a little bit extra storage under here with this nice cargo divider so things won't slide around. You also have these integrated tie downs too that tie stuff down, grocery bag holder. There's another tie down over here. Likewise, going to the previous generation of the QX60, you can see a similar size. I think there's probably a little bit more interior space, cargo space in the rear. looking at it now, but it's not a ton. And you can see that the seats fold fairly flat. You have those integrated tie downs as well, and you do have additional storage in here. So let's talk about drivetrain. So same thing with the brand new QX60 and the older QX60/JX35. Front wheel drive is standard, or you can get the optional intelligent all-wheel drive. Obviously intelligent all-wheel drive is a little bit more popular in our neck of the woods, and the reason why it's intelligent is because when all-wheel drive is not needed, it's going to send 100% of the power to the front wheels, and then if the front wheel starts slipping, it can send power to the rear wheels as needed for no-slip starts and improve traction in wet, snowy, slippery conditions. The reason why they have that 100% front-wheel drive bias is if the all-wheel drive system's constantly working all the time, even in dry conditions right now where you don't really need all-wheel drive, it's going to reduce the gas mileage of the vehicle. So that is why Infiniti has that 100% front-wheel drive bias on the all-wheel drive versions of the QX60. For safety systems and driver's assistance systems, Infiniti has actually been pretty far ahead of the curve for things like that. So when the JX35/QX60 first came out, things like adaptive cruise control, blind spot warning, blind spot intervention, lane departure warning, lane departure intervention, adaptive cruise control, backup collision intervention, predictive forward collision warning, forward emergency braking. Those are all new pioneering technologies, but we found a lot of those technologies on the previous generation QX60. It wasn't standard, it was optional depending on the packages. Likewise, we do find all those features available and a lot more than before standard on the completely redesigned 2022 or newer QX60. Alright, since we're talking about QX60s and maybe information about pre-owned ones, maybe it will give you a little bit more information. You know, as a used car manager, I see lots of QX60s/JX35s go through the shop, so I can you know, see what are areas of concern. So you know, if you're in the market for a pre-owned QX60, I'm going to just point to a few areas. They're great vehicles, but every great vehicle does have its weakness. The QX60 has some weaknesses, so I'm going to give you a few pointers so when you're shopping for the QX60s, you know what to look for, some red flags, things to check out just to make sure you get one that doesn't have any issues. Okay, so I guess the first thing to talk about, and this would apply to the previous generation QX60, not the new one, because the new one features a 9-speed automatic transmission. This one features a CVT transmission. We have seen some issues with the CVT transmissions. It's called transmission judder, which eventually can lead to complete transmission failure. So transmission judder is just that. When you're driving it, you'll feel the transmission juddering. You'll feel, you know, it slip a little bit sometimes when you give it gas. Sometimes you can feel some juddering and some vibration, some thudding when accelerating up a hill. That is always something to take into consideration because a brand new transmission or a used transmission could be, you know, $10,000, $12,000, $13,000. So obviously, you buy a used QX60/JX35 that needs a transmission, that could be a really bad deal, and we don't want that to happen. So the best thing to do is always to look for good service history on the JX35 QX60. Obviously, one that was regularly serviced at a, you know, Infiniti dealership or a Nissan dealership is definitely something to look for. Maybe if you're considering buying a QX60 or JX35, you can also call an Infiniti dealership. You can even contact me and I'll be happy to check for you. You just provide a VIN number and we can see maybe if the transmission was replaced under warranty previously. Sometimes when the transmissions are replaced under warranty, you get a warranty extension on the transmission. So some you know, QX60s that did have their transmissions replaced under warranty, they're given an additional warranty coverage just to protect them in case it happens again. So that always is something to look for. But you definitely always want to, you know, have it, if you're not sure yourself, have it inspected or checked by an Infiniti dealership. Obviously, it can be expensive to have a car checked, but it can be a lot more expensive to have a car with a bad transmission. So if you're thinking about buying a QX60, have an Infiniti store or you know, an ASE competent, you know, mechanic who is familiar with these vehicles, test them out, make sure you don't have any transmission judder. It's pretty obvious. I felt it before. You can definitely tell something is going on with the transmission does not feel normal. Sometimes in the early stages of failure, it can be a little bit more slight, but like I said, usually it's pretty obvious. So always go for a long drive on one of these things. Definitely drive it up a hill and add power in driving up the hill. Usually when you're going up a hill and you give it a little power on the throttle, that's usually a situation where you can feel that judder develop. So take a long test drive, get it inspected, and obviously, you know, get one under warranty. If it's under warranty, it will be replaced under warranty. So the warranty on US Infinitis is the powertrain, which would cover the transmission, is 6 years, 70,000 miles. And you can contact us or any Infiniti dealership or Nissan store. They can look up the remaining warranty on the vehicle, and again, they can check to see if there's any warranty extensions on the transmission. So that, like I said, it's a great vehicle. You know, it's pretty rare that we see transmissions go bad in these things, but you know, if it does, it's a pretty rotten deal for some people, especially if you don't have extra money to replace it and it's your primary vehicle. So get that checked out. Like I said, VQ35 is an amazing engine, award-winning engine. I've seen many of these engines of 200 and 300,000 miles, but they're due to the design in the QX60, I think it's the placement of the transmission is a little bit more heat involved. I have noticed that if you do not regularly change the oil in these things, sometimes they can have a tendency to develop engine sludge. Engine sludge really can't be fixed. Once an engine develops sludge, the only way to fix it is to replace the engine. We've seen vehicles of engine sludge. We've tried cleaning them, you know, replacing, you know, all the oil, flushing it. Doesn't fix it. Once it develops sludge, the engine is pretty much toast. There's no way to fix it. You could probably drive it for maybe another 10, 20,000 miles before the engine goes kaput, but it's a bad deal, and you don't want to get yourself in a situation with a vehicle of engine sludge. So one of the first things you want to do, and you know, this is probably a good, you know, word of advice for any pre-owned vehicle, is look for regular service history. If you're buying a, you know, a pre-owned QX60 /JX35, pull up the Carfax report, get a copy of the Carfax report, and look for regular service history. You know, you want to see oil changed, you know, about every 3,000 to 5,000 miles. If you see big gaps, you know, 10, 20, 30,000 miles or no oil change history, that's something you really need to be careful of, because the thing is, you know, even if the vehicle is under warranty, and then Infiniti finds out that the engine wasn't regularly, you know, serviced, the oil wasn't changed, and it developed sludge, there could be a good possibility that the engine will not be covered under warranty. And you know, a brand new engine's $18,000+. It's a lot of money for a new engine. In a lot of cases, it can be more than what the car is actually worth. So you don't want to get yourself in a situation where you have an engine with engine sludge. So obviously the best thing to do, you know, to check for engine sludge, again, get a pre-purchase inspection, have it checked out by a mechanic. But engine sludge is a little bit more easier to look at. The first telltale sign is you take the oil cap off, and you'll notice an engine that has sludge, you'll see a lot of sludge develop in there. Also, you know, take a peek in there, get a flashlight, and you take a look in there and see if it's dirty. You can kind of see sludge build up in there. Obviously, a competent mechanic is going to be a little bit better at determining this. But when I have a, you know, QX60 JX35 that's coming in on trade, and I don't see regular service history, and I'm concerned, I don't want to take a car in trade or buy a car that needs an engine, I'll take it back to one of our Infiniti certified techs, and I'll have them peek in there just to make sure everything is good. Also, you know, if you are worried about transmission judder, that's another thing to mention. You know, like an Infiniti store or a Nissan dealership, they can actually plug a computer system into the vehicle, and the vehicle will give some judder codes or transmission codes. So maybe if the vehicle isn't having issues right now, but it has a past history of having those judder codes or any transmission codes, that is something of concern, and you might want to stay away from that vehicle. So obviously, good service history is important. So when you own a QX60 or JX35, make sure you regularly service, change the oil. Everything will be good, and it will last many, well over 100,000 miles, maybe many hundred thousands of miles. It's a definite possibility, great engines. But yeah, you definitely want to check and make sure there's no engine sludge. Okay, some more minor things to look at. You know, one thing I noticed is sometimes on these older ones, these struts for the These struts for the hood, sometimes they can wear out and the hood won't stay up and they would have to get replaced. Obviously that's not a huge cost thing, but that's something to look for. And another area of concern to look for on the QX60 is they have these very fancy power lift gates. Well, sometimes they can start leaking. They can start leaking fluid, and at that point you'd have to replace these right here, and that can be a little bit more expensive. It's not going to cost, you know, as much as replacing an engine or transmission, but it can be kind of expensive. Okay, so when you're doing your pre-owned QX60/GX35 shopping, like I said, you know, check for transmission judder, get it inspected, make sure that transmission's in good working order, and then also look for regular oil change history, check the engine for sludge. Generally, those are the two big, you know, areas of concern that I, you know, when I'm looking at, you know, appraising one coming in on trade or maybe thinking about buying one. Those are things I look for. And remember, you know, a warranty isn't going to cover, you know, lack of maintenance. So you always want to get a well-maintained vehicle, because if you do, you know, have a vehicle that has a lack of maintenance, no oil change history, or, you know, very few oil changes, and it has engine sludge and needs an engine, like I said, it might not be covered under warranty, and that would be a really bad deal for you. So a little extra money and some pre-maintenance checks on buying an expensive vehicle is definitely going to possibly save you some big headaches in the future with major issues like having to replace engines and transmissions, which you don't want to do. All right, well, that tops off that informational video regarding the QX60. Hopefully it was helpful. Any other questions or comments, you know, please put them in the comment section, and thanks for watching.